Welcome to the Spawn Chunks. This is episode number 378, recorded Monday, December 1st, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft and is available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, including a video version that goes out on YouTube and on Spotify. If you are enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're listening. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Johnny, but you may know him better as Pixel Riffs on the internet. Hello, sir.
Hello, yes, we've been chatting it up already in the render distance, where Joel has been talking about some new hardware additions he's making to his PC setup. I've been diving back into Enshrouded, and we've both been lamenting how big file sizes are and how tiny our hard drives are in comparison. So if you want a bit more tech chat up front and a little bit of insight into what we've been doing lately, then you can get the render distance, the extended version of the podcast, by signing up to support the show on Patreon. Patreon.com/thespawnchunks is where you can do that. You get access to Patreon events and our Discord. Events include the monthly Minecraft Hangouts that we have basically every month, although our last one of the year just happened this past weekend, so that should be showing up in Patreon RSS feeds now. We usually take a break towards the end of December for the holidays, and so we're going to come back with a mammoth Patreon hangout in January that's going to cover 2 months of Patreon activity. So hopefully everyone has a lot of time to play Minecraft over the holidays. In the meantime, if you feel like giving yourself the gift of a Patreon subscription to the Spawn Chunks, once again, that's patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
Coming up this week on the show, Minecraft has announced the release date for Mounts of Mayhem, and there is another pre-release for that update that we get to talk about in the news. So to kick things off, what have you been up to in the survival guide this week?
This week has been a very technical one. So as promised, having gotten onto the Nether roof, I decided to follow up with a video about breaking bedrock, since a lot of people will want a passage up to and from the Nether roof without having to worry about going to the overworld, switching portals, and going back. And so I've been exploring new ways of breaking bedrock blocks, or destroying bedrock blocks more accurately, because breaking always sort of implies you can pick them up afterwards, which of course you can't with bedrock. So somebody reached out to me on Twitter recently and on Blue Sky and said, hey, I have a really neat way of breaking bedrock that doesn't involve using TNT. It doesn't consume any resources. It's all redstone based. Maybe you should be aware of this in case you're planning on doing that in future, which was a really good thing because I had a very hard time with the TNT based bedrock breaking method that I've used before. And a lot of people very helpfully pointed out to me in the YouTube comments what I have been doing wrong. It's weird because it worked a couple of times for me in a creative test world, but then when I tried to do it in the survival guide world, it didn't, even though I was kind of reproducing it under more or less the same conditions. Turns out it's very precise about where you've got to look when you're placing a piston, and the whole thing is you sort of force a piston into an invalid position that once it receives a block update, it basically just fires the piston head once and destroys whatever block it is facing, which in this case is bedrock. That's a very layman's description of it. I'm sure there's a lot more technical stuff happening behind the scenes. But the cool thing about these new redstone clock-based methods, which are new to me, at least. I don't know if other people have been tinkering with them and showcased them before. But Lars, or Heidewitzka on YouTube, reached out to me and said, there's a redstone clock kind of thing you can build that basically fires the piston at a faster rate than the tick speed of the game usually allows for. Like, redstone updates are usually 2 game ticks, and I think this fires it basically every single game tick, which is enough to keep the piston looking like it's fully extended the entire time, and does some weird stuff with redstone power where the redstone line doesn't even look like it's receiving any signal. It's not even like flickering or anything.
Oh, weird.
But what it's doing is updating it at the speed of game ticks happening. And that allows you to very easily swap over this piston for the second piston, basically, as long as you can instantly break the first piston. So you need to have efficiency 5 and haste 2. So it requires you to have a beacon set up. But using that method, I was able to break a bunch of bedrock on the Nether roof, and I was able to break a 3x3 hole through the bedrock in the floor of the overworld as well. And it's probably one of the most user-friendly methods of breaking bedrock that I've ever seen. So that's showcased in the survival guide, and I've also linked to Lars's video on the subject in the description and in the pinned comment as well, because he goes into a lot more detail and even has some of his own designs that he'd worked out as a result of seeing some of this in other people's videos and experimenting with the redstone behind it. as far as what the practicality of having a 3x3 hole into the void in the overworld means, I don't really know if I'm going to use it for anything, but I think it's very interesting that it's possible. And I'm at the stage of the Minecraft Survival Guide where it's much less about how to survive in Minecraft, and it's a lot more about what is possible, how can we find creative uses for that. And in the case of breaking bedrock on the Nether roof, it's potentially about making resource farms more efficient in future by preventing the bedrock from interfering with the overall height map of a chunk when it comes to spawning stuff more quickly. So it could potentially lead to me making a gold farm in the Nether cavern that has a chunk of bedrock basically removed above it, allowing the piglins in the farm to spawn more frequently, provided that there's adequate spawn proofing everywhere else. And yeah, as far as the bedrock in the overworld is concerned, you could even go into like taking entities down there now that we have happy ghasts and they're able to stick within a specific roaming range. They shouldn't get low down enough into the void if you leave them up by the bedrock that they end up taking any damage. And you could obviously tether them to fences with leads and that kind of thing. So I could imagine, if you're on a multiplayer server, for example, setting up like a kind of under the bedrock black market where the ghasts have, you know, chest boats or something like that. And you've got to fly down there and very carefully get yourself into the boat. But then you can peruse the wares in the chest boat inventory and then like leave again through this bedrock hole. And people wouldn't be able to get down there. You'd have to know it was there. I feel like there's some really fun ideas that you could get out of technology like that. So I'm kind of curious if we see that popping up on any servers, either stuff that I'm a part of or, you know, other bits and pieces that I might be participating in future.
Yeah, that's wild. I would not want to rely on the predictability of happy ghasts under the bedrock that close to the end of the void. Like, that's just, yeah, seeing how quickly they turn away and leave you when you jump off of them when you're building with them, and they go completely where, like, think about where you don't want them to go, and that's exactly where they go.
Yeah.
Like, they don't just hover 5 blocks away. They don't go up. If you're working up, they go straight down. If you're working at the bottom, they go straight into the sky. Like, they go in the opposite direction of wherever you just were. It's almost like it's programmed that way. But yeah, that would be tricky underneath the bedrock. I remember a couple of, I think it was last season or 2 seasons ago on Hermitcraft, where they were doing like under the bedrock races with Elytra. And then part of the issue was that like you couldn't find the other hole. Like you couldn't see it because everything just looks the same.
Yeah.
And so if it wasn't lit up properly, or if you didn't know the exact coordinates, then you'd start to run out of rockets, which started to really stress people out because like you're down there with like a lot of your gear, you're only Elytra, you know, whatever you're transporting from one space to the other. So it can be an odd experience to be on that side of the game. We don't break bedrock on the Citadel just out of fueling more creative builds. You know, like the nether farms we make, they have to be in the void or in the nether, which means that you have to find like a lava lake or you have to spawn proof something, that kind of stuff. And I mean, that's all in the guise of doing more content rather than just like, well, it would be so much easier just to build this up on the nether roof. It's like, yeah, but then like it kind of feels like just pop it in creative and build it there, you know, like it's a little bit different that way. So I do like some of the more creative uses of the nether roof though, like so using it for like a nether hub or fast travel, or using it as like a clean slate to then do something creative with it. That is a little bit more palatable for me than just using it as a way to get like so far above the nether that your spawn rates are just like crazy. So you build the farm once, use it once, and then you never have to use it again, like that kind of stuff. So I'd be curious to see what kind of creative things people could come up with. I know some of our community members have done some really cool nether builds recently, and that involved like a lot of clearing and a lot of decorating and a lot of consideration. So I'd be curious to see what would happen if that was then flipped. You know, like either, I know you can't place blocks under the bedrock in the overworld, but of course in the nether you can place blocks above the nether ceiling in Java, and that would be cool to see, like builds up there taking on a whole life of their own.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's currently a bit of a conversation about that happening in the Hermitcraft community, which I obviously keep track of as part of the Hermitcraft recap, but I've also kind of got my ear to the ground in general. And there was an issue with them converting their Season 10 world to Bedrock Edition recently, where you had to basically remove the entire Nether hub, which was built on the Bedrock roof of the Nether in Java Edition, simply couldn't appear in the Bedrock Edition world download because the above the Bedrock isn't a valid space to build. So you sort of miss out on a large part of what makes that server special and different connections around different places. So this season with Gemini Tay in charge of the Nether hub, she's building a lot of the connections inside the Nether cavern itself, even though I think some people still wanted to build farms on the Nether roof, and so they still wanted access to it anyway. So a lot of this Nether roof bedrock breaking stuff is kind of in the zeitgeist right now, so it was kind of a timely application of that in the video for me.
Very fun. Do you see yourself doing stuff like that in the future, like building on top of the Nether roof, or taking advantage of that, or were you just showcasing the method and then letting people kind of come up with whatever ideas they might want?
I was showcasing the method mostly. I imagine, if anything, I'll be removing bits of the Nether roof rather than trying to build anything up there creatively. As far as just like aesthetic builds and stuff. Outside of that, I plan on using it as a technical space, and I think I mentioned this briefly last week, just to sort of respect people's time when it comes to Java Edition players following the Minecraft Survival Guide who might not have as much time to spawn-proof large areas of the Nether to build a mob farm.
Right.
You can make very easy magma cube farms, ghast farms, zombie piglins, and so on and so forth. Even some people's bartering setups end up there because they're connected to gold farms. So while I would like to do a lot of that stuff in the Nether cavern eventually, I think it's also worth showcasing a version that can be built on the Nether roof for the sake of people who've only got a couple of hours a week to play Minecraft and wanting to have a quick project like that they can do that still yields decent results. So a bit of a mix of things, but probably not going to be using it for any kind of extravagant building, let's say.
Yeah, I can see myself potentially using it for something like a ghast farm, or something like a magma farm for frog lights, because I'm using so many of them in the sci-fi area, and the sci-fi area sort of lends itself to that too, where like I could take another portal from the overworld, sends me to another dimension, and then throws me on top of the Nether roof, and maybe I could just have it be decorated however I want, like not just this big empty void with a farm floating in it, but like actually have it be like a room with walls and spawn proof it and stuff like that. But I mean, it has the same advantages as a Mushroom Island in terms of like everything is spawn proof until you start placing blocks. Whereas Mushroom Island, like everything is spawn proof even with the blocks down. So it would be a little bit more of a challenge, but beyond that, like you'd still have a lot of control, which is nice.
Has it been fun building on the Mushroom Island with your sci-fi build without having to worry about like lighting and mobs and that kind of stuff while you're on the surface?
It has been. It has been really good, actually. And it's one of the things I've been messing around with this week. I've been clearing more of the mycelium away from the base of the command center, trying to get a little bit more of a not a bird's eye view, but the opposite, like the ground view, the player POV of what this thing looks like. Because I don't think I'm keeping the mycelium. I think I'm going to try to move it into something else, whether it's going to be bringing in nether foliage to make it look like an alien landscape, or to just like completely pave paradise and turn it into like circuit boards and lights and kind of like a Tron-esque kind of look. I don't know what I'm doing yet. But in process of doing that, I've also been experimenting with different lights and thinking a little bit more about how things are looking at night as well as during the day. The only thing that's unfortunate about the need, or the lack of need to sleep, because there's no mobs out at nighttime, I am playing with shaders, and it becomes really hard to see at nighttime. So unless you're holding, I joke that I hold a glow stick at night because I use a end rod as like a flashlight in my offhand, and with the shaders that provides enough light to see what I'm doing. But I still end up sleeping a lot of the time because it's hard to kind of see the textures and see what you're doing. But one of the things that I've done, I've added in some up lights. So I've created some depth in the central section of the command center, and between the front panel and the back panel, there's an extra block or two of space, and I've created a line of frog lights that light from below. And I mean, of course, that is something that's kind of exclusive to shaders, but it does create some cool sci-fi vibes. A lot of that futuristic cyberpunk sci-fi look, a lot of things are lit from the ground up. It's almost like we have so much control over light, we don't need to light things from above from a functional standpoint. We can actually like spend the energy to light things up from below. It's a very futuristic look. It's a good problem to have. And so I like the way that looks. I'm still messing around with the central section. I was back and forth this week on mirroring it and tearing it down. I tore down the temporary stuff. I created more layers. I definitely need more depth. Like that's the big thing. More depth and more contrast is what I'm going for. And I've got some things that I like. I've got some dark gray concrete and some polished deep slate that look sort of like, I don't know, almost like ribs or structural tubes inside. And that really helps the inside feel like it has a really solid structure that I can then lay panels on top of. So having that depth is kind of what I'm going for. but I haven't decided yet how to connect everything together, because I think I mentioned last week that the center of this comes together at an angle. It's like a 45-degree angle. So I'm trying to figure out where and how to create the detail in there. And unfortunately, I might have put myself in a situation where the scale is pretty small. And so the kind of detail I want might not be possible. I might have to think about more broader terms. And that's kind of where I went with this. I tried to go a little bit chunkier this week. I tried to take some of the things we talked about at the very base and manipulate those into larger blocks, 3x3 chunks of supports. And they work okay. But again, I can't figure out a way to resolve them as they come together in the middle. And so I'm still not super happy with them. But what I've decided to do was commit to the bit, so to speak, because I have 4 sides to this thing. I know I can try 4 different designs around this and just like compare one to the other, rather than trying to figure out like one side of the connection. I should really fulfill the whole connection, do my best attempt, and then do it again on another side and see what I can come up with, and see if it might look better. I am happy with the bay doors, and I'm happy with the wing panel designs. So if I'm stuck on something to do, I've got a lot of that to repeat. Like I've got 2 more doors that have to be completely made from scratch. I've got another of the wing panels on the existing wings. I've got 2 more wings to do. So like there's a lot of blocks to be placed without much thinking and designing. Like those designs are done. I'm quite happy with the sides of everything. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out like how to connect them. And so as I get frustrated with that connection, that design part, I've kind of taken care of some more I guess janitorial would be the great way to say it. Like just a little bit more of the boring stuff, like clearing a lot of dirt. Like I've got 6 or 8 shulker boxes full of mycelium. Why am I keeping it? I don't know. Again, I'm a digital pack rat. I'm sure there's going to be spots where the ground will have to be filled in, and having mycelium to do that will probably be helpful, at least for now. So that's one reason why I'm keeping it. I also have more shulker boxes that I know what to do with, so I can keep it. If it was a problem storage-wise, I probably wouldn't be keeping this much of it, but it's just easier to keep around. So that's kind of what I've been doing this week. It's been this back and forth between like taking an hour to clear out some land, taking an hour to copy a panel over. So it's not all that inventive or creative. You're just kind of using a happy gas to slowly, emphasis on slowly, copy one panel to the other. But it is good for, I'll say, the outlines. So the outlines of an angled panel are pretty tricky to do, and it's hard to see, especially if you're counting blocks or trying to repeat a pattern. So using the happy gas is pretty good for that. But when it comes to filling in the panel, it's much faster just to hop off the happy gas once you know where your lines are. It's basically like coloring, inside the lines. It's like, okay, the big gray triangle, I've made it. Now all I have to do is fill it in, put the bricks around the outside of it, and then I'm done. And so at that, I just jump off and I do from the inside, because I have the bottom panel done, so I could put scaffolding anywhere, and it's only 6 or 8 blocks to go up to the top of the panel. So that has been the faster method of like kind of using the happy gas for what they're good at, and then the moment that you get frustrated, it's like it's going to be faster to just jump off and do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, a mix of approaches I think always works best with these things. It's like, again, you're not using the happy gas necessarily to get from A to B if you can help it, but
No.
You can use it for these individual detail things. And I'm actually kind of surprised you haven't adopted what you suggested a little while ago of having like a happy gas basically for each side, because it's a little easier to just hop on the nearest one than it is to hop on one and traverse the entire thing. But one of the screenshots here that really sticks out to me is one where you're looking at the inside of it from the opposite angle. So you're sort of looking at the concave faces. It reminds me of when you had the the old sort of Star Wars compendium kind of books where they'd show you like a cross section of the inside of like a Mos Eisley home or something like that, and there'd be like a kind of cutout section where you could see inside the sort of furniture of a space and stuff from the outside. It always makes me wish it was more possible to do stuff like that natively within Minecraft, like instead of doing it in a render way where you have to kind of like strip away layers of it or import it into a creative world and cut out sections so you can have transparent bits and see inside. I kind of wish it was possible to do that somehow and have like an exploded diagram version of a redstone contraption, or have like a slice by slice section of a build, because I feel like that would be so easy to show people what was going on under the hood here and really show all of the elements that go into constructing something like this once the entire thing is actually built and the design is locked in and everything. But it's still really neat seeing the process, and I think these screenshots, even though obviously for you it's kind of this torturous process of trial and error trying to make it look good, I think these are really coming together.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, a lot of the stuff gets torn down too, like the scaffolding elevator, the a lot of the lines that you see, the guides from the diorite, all end up getting removed at some point because they're either replaced or they're old, or they don't line up anymore. And so even if you take the finished build and strip it down in like a separate program, block by block or layer by layer, you're not going to see the sketch lines as it was, to kind of like come up with the idea and the iteration that's involved. You'd really have to have, I would say, like replay mod or something going constantly, while you're doing something like this, to figure out what's going on. Or again, it's all on Joel Duggan VODs on YouTube, but it's all from a first person perspective. It's not like that top down, third person view, which would be neat. But just like we talked about in the pre-show, like there's just so much footage when you do stuff like that. Like it just becomes kind of untenable as a project, especially when I'm doing something that's months. Like I can't believe that I've been at this for as long as I have been. I mean, I guess I've been in the Mushroom Island for months. I have not been building the command center for months, although it's coming up on close to a month, I think. It's been a lot, and I'm looking forward to making some progress this week and thinking like, I have to stop thinking about the design and just kind of like take the things I like and fill them in. And then once the structure is kind of filled in, I will figure it a little bit more. I was thinking this week about the interior as well. I didn't make any changes, but I did some measurements and try to figure out like, what's my minimum space? How do I want this thing to look like it's powered? Do I want it to have some sort of cool central core? How am I going to get up and down? That kind of stuff. But those are, I think, problems I will tackle not last, but certainly later. Part of the fun and part of the, I guess, inventiveness sometimes with Minecraft is getting something to look the way that you want from the outside, which is the main kind of attraction to this, and then figuring out how to make it function on the inside. Thankfully, I've given myself lots of space, so I'm not really worried too much about the inside, but I can see myself, especially on the inside core, which when you get inside is not that big because these wings are huge, but they really come close together in terms of like the X. So that center part of the X in the design is not really, really big. I think I did a little circle, and the smallest circle, if I was to create like a pit in the middle, would only be 31 blocks wide. When you think about the scale of this thing, 31 blocks as an empty space in the middle is not a huge amount. That's not much different for scale than the square that you see of all my temporary shulker boxes. A circle of that scale, that 31 block circle, would kind of nick the corners of that square. So you're not getting that much room in addition to what's already there. So it's going to be interesting when I get to the internals of it, because I don't know yet where I'm going to put all the shulker boxes. I can't decide if I'm going to build something underneath temporarily or if I'm going to put them up in the wings. Like the plan was to put them up in the wings, but I'm worried if they're going to be too far away now. But I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, there's something to be said for convenience when it comes to designing storage, and like so often I plan some kind of large structure and then I'm like, I'm going to put all of the stuff I know I will need regularly as close to the front door as I can possibly manage. So yeah, I can see that being a frustration when you're like, oh, I need more diorite. Let me go to like the furthermost tip of the north facing wing to go and get that. And you've just spent so much time traveling at that stage. But yeah, as always, this continues to come together. I think the sort of rib sections you were describing look really good, and yeah, it's just about like finding all the modules that you want to stitch together and building them all in. So I think once you're happy with some of those designs and you've got them built out on the other like 3 wings, I imagine that everything else will just kind of like fall into place at a certain point, or if it'll just be like you can patch that up with whatever sort of basic material because you have enough detail in the rest of it that something needs to be a bit more plain,
Yeah, no, that's a plan too. Moving on to the news, the Mounts of Mayhem has an official release date. In an article published on Wednesday, November 26th, Mojang confirmed that the Mounts of Mayhem drop will be launched on December 9th for both Bedrock and Java Edition. The article goes on to remind readers of the rideable mobs and new spear weapon. Minecraft Java Edition 1.21.11 pre-release 3 was published on Tuesday, November 25th. Changes in pre-release 3, while charging, the spear hit animation and sound now play only after the previous hit animation has fully completed. While charging in first person, the spearhead now gradually rotates a fully vertical position over time, matching the behavior of the third-person view. The see-through leaves video setting is now turned off on the fast graphics preset, and tamed horses no longer run into cacti or sweet berry bushes. Fixed bugs of note in pre-release 3. Spears reach overrides the player's entity interaction range. Charge attacks are impossible when looking at a mob that's between 3 and 4.5 blocks away. Non-see-through leaves in programmer art look abnormal. A handful of other bug fixes can be found in the Minecraft.net changelog linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So it seems like Mounts of Mayhem is arriving when we expected. Pretty easy to guess the date, considering they've been sticking to a fairly regular pattern of releases, and we know releases come out on Tuesdays, and the early Tuesdays in December seemed likely based on the example of The Garden Awakens. So I'm honestly, at this point, really looking forward to seeing what happens after Mounts of Mayhem. And it's rare for me to be like looking further ahead than one update. I'm usually kind of celebrating the stuff that we're getting here and now. But as we've discussed in previous weeks, some of this stuff is going to be fairly peripheral to our gameplay styles. So I'm looking forward to like the new year at this stage and seeing what else they announce after they come back from their holiday break, presumably. But I think as with the Chase the Skies update, changing like lead mechanics and making those more robust, I think some of the adjustments to existing gameplay are going to be the more important aspects of this update for a lot of players. Like horse behavior is number one, and the one note in the changelog this time that said horses no longer running into cacti or sweetberry bushes. I think along with their ability to cross water better now, I think that's going to make horses a lot more viable for a lot of people and just going to remove a few of those bugbears that prevented people from using horses for long distance travel and travel across a variety of terrain. So I think it's really good that they've been adjusting this stuff just because people are thinking about using mounts a little bit more, since that's the theme of this gameplay drop, and hopefully that just improves the quality of life overall for everybody.
Yeah, I think quality of life is big for me as well. They've got some new graphic settings that are coming out. They've got some under the hood stuff that has improved performance. There's more accessibility options, that kind of stuff. Those are the things that I think will make the biggest change. There's also the data pack changes, things that having more data-driven stuff, more available things for data pack authors as opposed to requiring mods to do different things. And we haven't had time to see what's going to come out with that. So it'll be curious to see, like, once Mounts of Mayhem has been out for a little bit, what data packs are available and what are, people that are creative in that way able to do with Minecraft as it comes out of the box, right? I, like you, am looking forward to what's going to happen next. We tend to have snapshots quite quickly after the release of a new drop. That, of course, will be a little bit extended because they'll have the holiday season in between Mounts of Mayhem and then probably whatever we're seeing next in the new year. But I'm happy that I won't have to scramble to update the Citadel, right? There's not going to be anything that I need. There's no chunks that I need to load. I don't have to worry about, because we're not really champing at the bit to enjoy the Mounts of Mayhem on the Citadel. I don't have to worry about data packs and mods updating, that kind of stuff. So by the time we get to another drop, there'll be plenty of time for a lot of those kind of kinks to be ironed out. And so hopefully the transition in the next drop in the new year will be a lot smoother for the Citadel. And I don't have to do this like every 3 months because it's not hard work. It's just tedious to kind of like keep track of everything and update stuff and kind of go from there.
Yeah, it is nice that you don't have to update sequentially. Like, that's one of the things, again, that I always feel like is a shame that it's forced on Bedrock Edition players, always having to play the latest version. Like, I think it's nice that you can choose to not worry about it this time around, and then inevitably the Nautilus, the Camel Husks and whatever are going to show up when you eventually update to a future drop that's much more of a priority for you. So as per usual, I'll be updating the Minecraft Survival Guide just because there's nothing really stopping me from doing that, and then I get to cover a little bit of this stuff. But I think I'm most excited still for the Spear. I'm looking forward to lunging around the Windy City using wind charge launchers to gain height and then seeing how far I can get sort of air dashing around the place. But I will report back on that in future, and we still got another week's show before we have the actual release of this update, so we'll be close to reporting on it next week, but we'll have the probably released candidates to talk about next time.
Moving on into chunk mail, we have a reply to our inbox conversation of the last couple of weeks. If you'd like to email the show, you can send a message to spunchunkmail@gmail.com. Please keep the emails short and on point. It does help us include them in the show more easily. And be sure to let us know if you're a patron as well, because that also helps us organize the inbox. And Johnny's got this one.
Yep, this comes in from Jess Fluffykins with the subject of simple furniture flavor. Hiya, love the show. A simple solution to seating could be a wool slab block that allows the player to sit on top when the slab is in either the upper or lower slab placement. 16 colours, and it would still require the player to build the rest of the seat. To add further flavour with the furniture items we already have, what about allowing the player to add banner patterns to beds, or adding armour trims to shields, where banners don't transfer well, and adding armour trims to weapons and tools to add a splash of colour to our items? It would be easier to identify my items with, say, a purple Silk Touch pickaxe and a yellow Fortune pickaxe. Thanks for putting on a great show each week. Jess, my legs aren't tired, and the pigs aren't cutting it.
Well, that's a fluffy furniture flavor feature if I've ever heard one. To say the least.
I think you said the most there, Joel.
I'm tempting fate on a podcast, especially if you sit down on a wool slab and it makes the same sort of like frumph noise that wool does when you walk on it. I can see a lot of players just kind of like standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down, making that noise over and over again. It would be very satisfying to feel like it would sound like you're sitting, you know?
It feels like also a seat that you could sit in front of the warden and it wouldn't be able to hear you sit down if it's all part of the wool family of blocks, right? So you could imagine players, there's that one structure that's part of an ancient city that I think sometimes spawns, sometimes doesn't. There's like a little campsite where the tents have all sort of collapsed, and really it's just a great way for players to get wool in an environment where you need it quite frequently. But I like the idea of in amongst that being these little wool chairs that they've like thrown it down like a little, almost like a sleeping bag style situation, but something they've been able to sit on around their campfire.
I have to start thinking about getting some wool because at the scale that I'm working in the Mushroom Island, I want to start thinking about Swift Sneak and how that might speed up my process. I don't know where there's a Deep Dark. I've never invaded one, so like I really have to stock up on some wool and think about what that might do to help me move around. But talking about wool and wool slabs, I can sort of see the vision with the wool slabs. Like I get that it would look sort of like a beanbag chair, but there wouldn't really be any room for legs. And if you used it as like a tabletop, then like the legs on your chair would be a meter tall. And that's something I do find very challenging when I'm thinking about furniture in Minecraft because of the scale of Minecraft. It's hard to kind of get my head out of real world measurements because like a meter by meter block is absolutely massive. It doesn't feel like that in game at all. And so to have furniture in the game as slabs, I feel like you kind of set yourself up for a scale issue where when you see a player standing next to it, like on a server, the chair is going to look massive compared to the player or table or things like that. So I still do like the idea of wool slabs, though. I think that could be interesting. And one of the reasons I bring that up is because on the Tables and Chairs data pack, one of the things that you can do is after you place a chair, you can add carpet to it and it changes the seat color. Nothing else changes about the chair, but just like the part where your bum would go goes to like red, green, yellow, orange, like whatever the wool color is. It's wool texture. It's the same as vanilla. It looks very much like part of the game. And I thought that was a really cool way of keeping a couple of simple chair models, but making them look a little bit fancier. Like if you put a chair in a house, like a dark oak chair with a white carpet seat on it, it looks much nicer than just like a plain wood chair that you might see in like a pub or a workshop. It looks much fancier, kind of like a chair you might see at like a condo in an apartment or something like that. And so using wool and having all those colors available, you can then swap out things like different color signs. So if you had like cyan wool and then you had either a pale oak sign, or if you had a warped wood sign, like all those things that you can combine and contrast. As we talked about, I think it was last week, someone talked about having buildable furniture as opposed to just like straight up furniture in the game. And I do like that idea. I just think the scale would be a bit of an issue with wool slabs. What do you think?
I think if you model it after beds, which I'm still thinking about what you said a few shows ago, where it's like, we have beds as furniture, but we don't have anything more complex than that. Or like,
Right.
why don't we have chairs if we have beds? Beds are actually 9 pixels high, which I think is a really decent scale for the seat of a chair, and they have legs as part of it. It's 5 pixels worth of leg, and then 4 pixels worth of like mattress and bed sheets and everything going on top of that, with obviously like a flat texture. But I think if you model the chair here, the cushion part of it, after the lower half of a bed, like the forward block of a bed, if you made it to that scale, I think it suits the style of Minecraft already, since you have like a bed that's already existing as part of the furniture we can craft. And you just move the legs up so that they're on the corners of a single block instead of the corners of a 2-block slab setup. But that's also slightly, it's like 1 pixel higher than a slab, because it's 9 of the 16 pixels you have in a full block. So I think those sort of work quite well as the typical thing, and it sets them apart from what we already have with slabs, which makes them feel a little bit more unique and interesting, and allows for decoration around them still to feel a little different. So I like that maybe as a model for it. You obviously miss out on the top half, bottom half thing that Jess is suggesting, but I think it's a neat look at how chairs could potentially fit with what we have in Minecraft already. And in general, I like the idea of modular furniture. I do think it's cool to have just a seat as part of it and then let the player dress that up however they want to. And I still don't think that's too far away from what we can do with wool already, because you can already make carpets with it. And you don't have that many other things that you can make carpets with, but none of them have slabs available to them. So this is a chance for wool to kind of, again, become more separate from, moss can make moss carpet and that kind of thing. I could see people using these as like a sofa as well. If you put 3 different wool seats side by side, you could turn it into a 3-seater. You could, if you gave it little legs like that, I think that could work really nicely. And that allows, of course, for more creative patterns of those things. Like we have like a corner sofa where one part of it is like an ottoman kind of thing. You end up with like a few different orientations and designs that players can maybe have more opportunities to be creative with, instead of it removing creativity because players are always using it a specific way. So I think that is definitely the solution, is having some sort of like seat block. I do like the beanbag idea as well. The beanbag sort of suits the kind of casual sitting around that can happen in Minecraft for sure.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of what was suggested last week or the week before, which was to have a stool. So you'd have the wool block would have like the bottom of a bed would look like a stool, but then you could put like, because it's not the height of a full block, you could put a shelf or a trapdoor or a door on the back of it as varying heights on the back of a chair. And then the same thing, you could put shelves or trapdoors or signs on the sides. Even a sign on the back would work as like a low chair. Like, I think a lot of my visions of furniture is kind of strung by North American culture, right? So like if you think about different seats in different cultures around the world, having just a sign on the back of half a bed could be enough for a very low chair, the kind of chair that you might sit cross-legged on, like that kind of a thing. And I mean, it would be a meter by meter, so like it would be big enough to do that, right?
Yeah.
I've seen recently computer chairs that are meant to be double wide, and that's because people want to sit on them in a different way than just like feet on the floor, staring at the screen. And the girl that I saw online was using it because her dog constantly wants to be in her lap, and she can't work with the dog in the lap. Yeah. So she bought a chair big enough for the both of them, so the dog still sits next to her and gets the cuddles that it wants. But then she has like free range of the keyboard in front of her because the dog is to her side, not directly on her lap, which I thought was pretty funny. When it comes to other things in the email, like adding banner patterns to beds, I mean, that's cool. I don't know if it would translate as well because, as you mentioned, like the pixel dimensions of a bed are a little bit different than say what you get on a banner. And I know they don't work on shields. They do because of the mod that I have. It's a 1-to-1, but in vanilla, it's not a 1-to-1, a banner going onto a shield. So, and I don't know how that would work in terms of your item inventory, because people use a lot of beds, and I don't know if Mojang would want to have like that many items as like a potential inventory crutch, like because every kind of pattern that you would put on a bed combined with every color that you can currently make of a bed would then create a lot of just different items to track and stuff in the inventory. So I don't know how that would work. I do think it's a neat idea, and certainly a great way to personalize it. Like if you had a green bed with a creeper face on it, like that's kind of fun. It reminds you of like a kid's bedroom if you wanted to do something like that. Um, I, the only thing that I think would be interesting is that if banners being added to beds removed the kind of like pillow and turn down texture on the bed, because then you could use beds for other things, right?
Yeah.
Like you could, if you had a banner pattern that looked like a floor, then you could put that on beds and use beds as a floor, and or as a different design, and that could be really, really interesting, like path blocks or something. That could be kind of a fun way to texture and build with beds. It would be weird walking on them. I think you kind of bounce around a little bit, but again, like that could be a fun mini game. There could be a bunch of different uses for that. So if it only changes like the blanket part of the bed, then I don't know how interested I would be in that. But if it covered the entire bed top to bottom, that would open up a lot of creativity for people that are into banner art and do different things like that to play with the beds. And I also really like the idea of adding armor trim to weapons and stuff. I think we've talked about that on the show before, but just color coding in the inventory, as convoluted as Minecraft can get, especially for new players, I feel like having tools as different colors or handles as different colors really would help differentiate them. So like putting redstone on your fortune pickaxe and then putting a diamond trim or something like that on your silk touch, or the most powerful pickaxe you have, the one that you don't want to break, making that look really decorative when you go to look for it, or if you want to know which one it is in your inventory, like that's the one that looks the shiniest. And you can still do that with names right now, but you have to hover over, and it sounds like a first world problem, but like it does add an extra step to something that could be a lot simpler, I think, in the UI.
Yeah, I think the difference is, I don't know if you could do it with the variety that you give to armor trims just because of the size of the canvas you have for like,
Right.
putting tool trim on like a shovel where the head of the shovel is like 4 pixels or something. There's not a whole lot you could do. So it'd have to be its own probably dedicated tool trim and maybe like a very limited range of designs compared to armor trim. But
Fair.
even then, like I do like the idea of being able to personalize your tools even more than we already have. So like, yeah, I think that's definitely something that, ideas for a rainy day seems like a nice one. Adding banner patterns to beds is a fun one, but yeah, I'm very curious how Minecraft would handle that behind the scenes, especially because the way banners work right now, you get if you're going to the creative inventory, you can get all the banner patterns and you get a blank banner, but you don't have a combination of every possible set of banner patterns that ever exists hanging out in the creative inventory. So you'd presume it would be handled the same way with beds, where you could kind of overlay layers onto it. I sort of wonder, how taxing is that for the game to render? How does it handle the fact that the model is 3D, and so you might expect some of the pattern of a bedspread to like wrap around onto the sides? Do they just not bother with that? And if not, then if you look at the way banner patterns handle stuff like gradients, you've somehow got to overlay the gradient onto the sides of the bed as well. So it couldn't just be like purple bed with like a purple to cyan gradient on the top, because then that's going to look very strange compared to the side textures of the model. It's a really, really cool idea, and I would love to see it implemented in a way that makes sense, especially if, as you said, they remove the rest of the texture of the bed to make it look a little less like a bed and more like, a coffee table that's got like a kind of draped tablecloth over it or something that, right? Like there's definitely like ideas like that could work really well. But beds are already shaded to look like they have, like, the sheets are folded a specific way and that kind of thing. So with that, and with banners being a flat color, possibly that's an obstacle. You'd have to like overlay the bed pattern onto the banner pattern if you wanted it to like really look like the sheets were different. So there's a few pitfalls there design wise. It'd be a real challenge for the art team, but yeah, definitely something that I'd like to see them do if they're looking into more personalization stuff, the way we got with banners when they were introduced in 1.8, armor trims in 1.20, and other little kind of customization tweaks that we've had throughout the years. I'm still honestly quite surprised that shields haven't been revisited and like shield customization made to look a little bit more polished, because some of the more intricate designs of banners get absolutely lost, and I do think that's a shame. So I'm half tempted to install something like the mod you have to make the full banner pattern appear on the shield. But yeah,
it was really handy.
Yeah, I think that's just one of those things that might show up in future, but I think most people just are happily ignoring shield customization for the time being. So for the main discussion this week, we wanted to talk about what's on our Minecraft Christmas list. Since 'tis the season, I'm allowing it to be the season now. We're in the 1st of December. I will say that up front. Because, Christmas has been banned in my Twitch chat for the rest of the year. But no, we're able to talk about it now. And so I thought we could have like a lighthearted discussion about what like new blocks, items, or features we would like Mojang to send down the chimney. Probably not this year, because of course they've got Mounts of Mayhem on the way before Christmas. But like if we're talking about wish lists for the future, and it's a good time at the end of this year to sort of reflect on everything we've had recently and think about what's still missing for us, and especially inspired by recent projects. I know you've been sort of thinking about the sci-fi build palette and how possible that is in Minecraft with the blocks we have. So why don't you kick us off, talk about what's on your Christmas list and things that might help inspire the sci-fi build if they were added to the game.
And that's where my mind has been for this discussion too, is like non-medieval. It doesn't necessarily have to be sci-fi, but even just something as simple as having something in a modern city, or like just contemporary kind of build styles would be really, really cool. The big thing that comes to mind is neutral blocks that don't have natural textures. So by that I mean a lot of the blocks I'm using right now are stone types, but I'm only using flexible stone types that can sort of pass as metal, like polished diorite, polished deep slate, polished tuff. The regular versions of those all look like high textured stones. There's too much going on. They don't look like a synthetic material. And then other things like your woods, for example, you can't really use that many of them, because they're all brown and they have very much a texture that says wood planks. Like, I am a wooden door. There's not a lot you can do with those. Sometimes you can get away with like the sides of things, like a pale oak trapdoor from the side or a birch trapdoor from the side sometimes work. We saw over the weekend some acacia trapdoors used in a fighter jet that worked quite well. But again, like, you have to have the right context for them. It's not as flexible. And so I'd love to have something with stairs and slabs that's a little bit more neutral, something that could be used as like a metal or a concrete or something. Because even the concrete blocks in Minecraft are very flat. Like, there's no texture to them at all, almost. They're mostly just like a colored block. But without stairs and slabs, you're kind of limited as to what you can do and creatively, and you're trying to layer shapes and things like that. And so it becomes a little bit trickier to use those. And they're also very bright. Like, they're not natural looking materials, in terms of building materials. So I'd love to see more neutral blocks that have like more, I don't want to say manufactured, but flexible textures, things that could be interpreted as different things depending on the context. Like, you could put it in the floor of a castle and it would look like the floor of a castle, but if you put it on the wall of a spaceship, it's going to look fine there too. And I think it's tricky, obviously, but to have them be non-specific textures, it makes things a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean even further into the more modern stuff and saying anything that skews more industrial is probably on my list, like, especially to go along with stuff that we've had added recently, like copper and copper grates and things like that. I think it's funny that we've had an update with the Copper Age update. A lot of people were talking about it like, this is Minecraft's Industrial Revolution. You have a little robot helper who can help you sort things. There are copper chests that look very mechanical, and there are all of these different like additions as far as the copper block palette goes. And then the next gameplay drop, we're back to riding horses and wielding spears, and it sort of feels like technologically a step backwards. I get that Minecraft isn't expected to progress in the same way human history has. Like, I absolutely understand that this is not a world that's progressing forward and would reach a computer age and that kind of thing. But, I mean, the computer age is Redstone, really. It just depends how much time and effort and space you have to put into devices like that. But I think these little branches on the technology tree really interest me. And so if we had more metals that really felt like metals, not necessarily add lead or whatever for the sake of it, or tin for the sake of it, but if there were ways of using materials that we already have to make things that felt a little bit more industrial, so that we could stop like faking it with some of the stuff that when you look at it closely, you're like, oh really, that's just a bunch of like wood and fences and stuff dressed up to look like a crane. I think there's definitely merit to there being something like a very easily tileable metal block that wouldn't have like beveled edges the same way that, you know, iron blocks and stuff do, so that you could make something that looked like a big wall of metal sheeting that wouldn't have clear, obvious rivets and joins between each of the blocks. I would love something like that. Something with the flow of a smooth quartz block, but the sheen of something a bit more metallic. And I think that's one of the things that feels like a bit of a shame with copper right now, is that we end up having to mix in things like acacia strip logs in with fresh copper to make it look like pipes go in a specific direction, because if you're building the pipes out of full copper blocks, all you have is tileable textures. And the acacia works in some cases but not with others, because if you want it to look like a fresh copper material, or if you want something to look in one of those like middle patinaed sort of copper ranges, your material choices vary a little bit, and acacia looks like worn and old and rusted, which is sometimes the aesthetic you're going for, but other times it's not. So yeah, I think anything that skews a little bit more industrial, and along the same lines, I think more animated blocks. Lately, I feel like mobs and entities have been adding life to players' bases, and Mojang has really focused on adding things like the Allay and the Copper Golem, and when they've discussed other mob ideas, a lot of it has been about creating a world that feels like there is life going on in the utility that these mobs have to players. And I think it'd be really cool to see a few blocks that support stuff like that, a few more blocks that are capable of animation. And players lately have been feeling that same urge, because I've seen a lot of players with the sort of build stone movement that's happening in the building community, where they're incorporating redstone details that look like animated fans and that kind of thing. You see Mumbo doing this a lot in Hermitcraft, inspired by a couple of other folks that he name checks in his videos. But a lot of these are really noisy because they rely on constantly flapping pistons or trapdoors or, you know, redstone circuits that are going off constantly in the background. And so I'm wondering if maybe there's a quieter solution in Mojang providing some stuff that feels animated, but wherever possible, I think still ambiguous, which is a difficult ask, I know. But I would love stuff that is animated in the same way that fire is animated, or the way that skulk sensors are animated, you know, having like waving textures on things. You have stuff like sea lanterns and prismarine that are animated but a lot more subtle. So I feel like something that's a happy medium between those two, I think would be really interesting. And, you know, in terms of the era, it could be a bit more agnostic. It doesn't have to be like an industrial metal fan to catch my attention, but I just think there's maybe room for something like a little wooden propeller or something like that could just as easily work in an industrial setting as it could in, you know, a garden where you've got little decorations out in the front lawn and there's like a little child's windmill going around or something like that.
Yeah, when you were describing that, I was thinking about a fan, like an animated fan block that you can point in different directions, kind of figure out whether it would have any redstone functionality as well as decorative. Like that kind of a block you could add to the game and then give it enough functionality that a lot of different players would be satisfied with it. Like they would probably find uses for it either functionally or fashionably. I like the idea of blocks that have either animated textures on the side. Like I really like that furnaces animate, but you have to constantly have something in them. Like it would be really cool if there was a way to have a furnace in the side of your cabin build just kind of going all the time, right? As opposed to having like a campfire in the hearth. I think it would be fun to have that kind of stuff going. And in terms of like more flexible things, like I recently put a bunch of observers in the floor plate of one of the bay doors on the command center, and they blink in sequence. So it just kind of looks like a ready light for like whatever mag-safe, you know, door lock is going to come down and latch the thing closed. And I like that idea of being able to animate that block, even though the red light is something that has to happen. Like you as a player have to make that happen. It's a very, very simple animation. So you could have something that looks like a nice aesthetic block that doesn't do anything until it's powered by redstone or has some sort of other connectivity, like the skulk sensors are sensitive to sound. It would be cool to have something like that where players could choose to animate it or not, right? Depending on how they use it, you know, whether it's close to livestock or whether it's got a block proximity or redstone. I think that could be a fun way to control things.
Anything else sticking out from the sci-fi build palette that is missing for your command center?
So the thing that grabs me right now is wood. I've got pale oak is the only neutral wood. Everything else is a shade of brown or some other warm color. And having a gray wood or even a black wood, even though I think a black wood in Minecraft would end up just being dark gray, I think would be really, really cool because given the variety of shapes and the suspension of disbelief that's possible with some wood types, having dark gray or gray would be really, really useful. I would prefer a solid trap door or door similar to like a dark oak door, or I guess spruce would be a really good example. Spruce trapdoors and doors, even though those are very specifically wood textured, the model itself would be kind of what I would want from a gray wood, because then it allows you to add those in different contexts. You could use them as fins, you could use them as layers, you could use them as clamps, in the same way that you use copper trapdoors on the side of acacia to make it look like the corner of a pipe. You could use gray wood trapdoors on the corner of anything dark to make it look like it's turning a corner or having some sort of rivet or something. And I like that control a lot better than, as you mentioned before, having a repeatable texture. I'd rather have something to layer over top of a block to break it up, because it does two things. It provides a texture break, but it also provides a geometry break. And I think that's a lot more useful from a design point of view. A gray shelf would also really help, because right now I want to use a shelf in a lot of my sci-fi detailing to add light blocks to, because of the way that, well, they look cool with the shaders, but they also are pretty bright in terms of displaying something like a shroom light or even just a block of concrete on your shelf. It looks kind of like it could be a light or a lit detail. And I still have, like, the darkest block I can get is like a dark oak shelf. It's still brown, right? So that doesn't really work with a bunch of other metal blocks or stone blocks that I'm pretending are metal. The brown is kind of like, well, it looks okay. I can get away with it if I put it in a shadow. Like if I put it underneath an overhang or I put it in the background of something, it's not bad, but it's difficult, to make that work as any kind of futuristic material, because it still very much looks like a wood shelf in most of the contexts that you have. Again, pale oak is probably the most flexible because it's still warm white and has some texture, but in the right context, I think it could be something that could look good. Gray signs would also be very helpful as well, especially if you want to do like glow ink details and have those kind of things add to sci-fi details that you can't normally get in the game. Having a more neutral sign color would be helpful. And you mentioned acacia. Having a stripped gray wood would also be useful for beams, or any kind of like metal trim. I know we've got basalt, like we've got polished basalt, but the contrast on that texture is so high, it doesn't really look like the kind of thing that you want. And that's the kind of thing I was talking about before with those neutral textures. I wouldn't call smooth basalt a neutral texture. It's a pretty high contrast texture. Something like stone is what I would call a neutral texture that really does look like brushed metal or stone, depending on the context that you're using it in. And actually, to bounce quickly back to those metals, I was thinking about brushed aluminum while you were talking. And I know that adding aluminum to the game just kind of feels like an unnecessary thing. But using the brush that's existing in Minecraft on blocks, like say an iron block, to change the texture of it and create a new block could be really interesting, right? Brushed metal, or using dye to have like dark iron. Instead of shiny iron, we all want like that black wrought iron, cast iron look. Using black ink to change your iron into dark iron would be great. I think that would be a really fun way to do stuff like that.
Having something that looked like cast iron bars and that kind of thing. Like I've worked with a couple of mod packs. I think Fantasy Minecraft had a pack in it that included dark iron as part of a mod, and I ended up using that a lot in my like haunted house looking build. I thought that was a fun way of doing that. So I'm on board with the grey wood. I think either grey or green would probably be my hope for a future wood type, and I probably want the wood to lean a little bit darker than the sort of light gray concrete powder kind of hue. I think I probably want a regular gray for that, but green is the other one. I'm pretty sure BOO retextured Junglewood to green for one of his previous series, and I really liked that like fresh, almost like living wood color that you get when you're pruning living bushes in real life. inside some of the thicker branches. The kind of thing that like bamboo blocks and bamboo cane starts out like in Minecraft, but then as soon as you start crafting stuff with those, the planks and everything associated with it are yellow. If we kept that green palette but had like this typical plank texture, I feel like I'd be a lot happier. And obviously that skews away from what you're talking about with the sci-fi aesthetic, but I feel like that'd be a shoe-in for something like palm wood if they add that, or if they wanted to add something, maybe like a jungle edge biome, one of the sort of sparse jungles could have an additional tree thrown in there that had green wood as a kind of interesting contrast to the jungle wood. I feel like those could go really well together.
Yeah, I could even see them adding a green wood in another biome or in a unique tree that just is not a real life tree, like adding some sort of weird snaking vine or something that's more aggressive, or something that has a very unique model to it, or exists in caves, maybe. So, like maybe they give a tree in the deep dark, and that's where you get your green or your that kind of wood. That could
Sculpt
be kind of
tree,
fun too.
yeah.
Sculpt tree, yeah, there you go. That could have. Talk about animated textures. I really like the animated textures on warped wood and crimson wood, and that could be fun to have on like your green. You get all your green planks and your logs and things if you strip them, but if you leave the bark on, maybe you could have like a green shimmer, similar to how like fireflies have like a sparkle to them. Like you could have some really fun textures with stuff like that. Those look really cool with shaders, by the way. Sometimes the shader pack authors really make the crimson logs, they look like they have animated veins, kind of like James Cameron's Avatar, like those kind of bioluminescent looks.
Yeah,
that's kind of fun. Speaking of light emitting blocks, actually, that's something else I'd like to see. Torches, lanterns, candles, etc. are all medieval models. We don't really have a lot of light emitting blocks that aren't full blocks that you can use in like a futuristic or sci-fi area. End rods, beacon, and daylight sensors are the ones that come to mind. And really, as a light source that you can build with, end rods are the ones that are the most flexible, because daylight sensors are not like you sort of use them in that way, but like you're mostly looking at the bottom of them. Like you can't place them upside down and make them look like lights in the ceiling.
Yeah,
they have a nice bottom texture, but they don't really function in that way. You can't place them directionally. You can't place them on the sides of things. They always have to face up. But end rods are pretty flexible. Like you can fake a lamp in a modern apartment by making the stem of the lamp the light source, and then putting whatever you want on the top of it, whether it's a carpet or any kind of other decorative block on the top. I've used end rods in a couple of the situations on the command center, whether it's like inlaid into the structure of the door or whether it's hovering above the numbers. But again, like the way that they attach to blocks is kind of limited too. So I would love to see some sort of additional light source that's sub block, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy, like even just like light cubes. I have the mini block data pack on the Citadel, and for fun I shrunk a frog light just to kind of see what they looked like, because I've never really had the opportunity. I didn't really need them around West Hill, so I never tried it. And they don't emit any light, but the texture is pretty neat. Like it's just like a smaller version of the frog light. And so having some sort of sub-block light source would be cool, especially if it was something like a trapdoor, something like a panel, in the same way that you can put an all-white map in an item frame and have that kind of like light up. I think it would be cool to have it as like a trapdoor, because then you could place it like on the side of something, on the underside of something. It would have some depth to it that you could play with, surround it with slabs, embedded in something. That could be really, really fun, especially if they came in different colors, as opposed to just like white or yellow or something like that. And I would imagine they would work at the same way that a regular light source would work, just have a full blast. For sci-fi stuff, you tend to want things to be a little bit more standoffish, but that's something I'd be looking forward to, is having some more light emitting blocks that don't look like lanterns and torches and stuff that you see in caves and campfires.
Yeah, definitely. Like more stuff like the end rod, I think would be really interesting for the game. And if they're looking in future to do some sort of end update, then what better place to have something that feels a little bit more alien and out of sync with the medieval overworld kind of fantasy Minecraft that we've been playing. The other thing I'm hoping from, not just from like an end update, but in future in general, is more blocks that create atmosphere. And this is a much more nebulous sort of concept, but like obviously we've had some success lately with spore blossoms, and then much more recently falling leaves and fireflies, which you just mentioned, like other particles adding life to builds, again in the same way that more movement is created by having some of these mobs around. And so I like the idea of more blocks creating player controlled atmosphere. We've talked recently about fog as well, and how that's changing a little bit with the, draw distance at which fog is created ambiently in the world. But if there was the ability for the player to control when mist kind of comes in, and there being sort of like something along the lines of, how campfire smoke is generated by a campfire block, but on a much larger scale, and traveling more slowly and kind of drifting more laterally, sort of like the clouds do, I suppose, but the kind of thing where it's like more of a particle cloud. I think that'd be really interesting for obviously spookier builds around this time of year, around like Halloween and stuff. People want to build like haunted houses, and having like wisps of smoke going through a graveyard build is always going to add a little bit of atmosphere. But even just like something a bit more natural, like the fog rolling in from the sea in some sort of harbor town or something, it'd be great to have something like that. I'm imagining basically a redstone fog machine. I think is what I've just realized this is like,
Yeah.
you put a bucket of water in something that looks like a dispenser but isn't, and instead of ejecting the water as a full source block, it ejected as a kind of mist. And I like the idea of having something like that adds a little bit of atmosphere locally to the area that you're in, and can thicken the fog in ways that don't necessarily feel like your standard Minecraft like potion particles, where it's just a bunch of like little pixelated designs. Something that sort of thickens the atmosphere of the world around you could be a really interesting thing to add. And very theatrical, I suppose, but that's again where the smoke machine idea kind of comes from, I think.
I think that could be cool if it worked like the opposite of a spore blossom. Like if it was something that you could find in the world that would be like you could collect it and use it and maybe craft it for your builds to create that fog effect. But then you could also have that be, from a design perspective, from Minecraft's point of view, as like a part of a challenge in a zone. Like maybe this new area has fog everywhere, so it's hard to navigate, or it's hard to fight the bad guys. Like if you've got skeletons shooting you and you can't see them, like that's going to be a problem, right? And so you have to like find and take out the fog plant or whatever it is, and then bring it back. And even if it was a mob, like even if a mob was like emitting fog particles around it, I mean, you could capture it and keep it in one spot and have that be where your fog comes from for your build, or you could have it wander around, like especially if it was an area effect similar to how fireflies work, where people still get the firefly effect if you bury the firefly bush, right? What if you had a mob that was emitting fog, and then you gave it like a little path under the ground under your base, and it kind of like walked around at will, and the fog just kind of moved around your castle and kind of like came in and came out depending on what the mob did? That would be really fun, I think.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea a lot. I think that's a fun one. And on a similar note, I kind of want more like this is tangentially related, more transparent blocks that aren't glass. And I was thinking about this when I was thinking about like the fog idea, thinking, what if we had like a borderless glass that you could sort of create your own custom clouds with and that kind of thing. But people do that with resource packs already. And I see it sometimes done effectively and sometimes not, because I think a lot of the fog it's about texture, and you're not always like able to do texture when it's really obvious that there are joins between thicker blocks. So I sort of pivoted that away and thought about copper grates. And I kind of want stuff more like that, but with different materials, because a lot of the time, it's not even just for creating stuff like windows, but when you're trying to create transparency and a sense of airiness in a build, you're left with things like trapdoors and glass primarily. I think copper grates were a really neat addition in that sense, because they offered a different texture to stuff like that, not to mention the different materials that copper can, resemble. Like we have a variety of colors there. But I think in terms of designs, I think there could be a little bit more, whether it's like a lattice style thing, whether it's like an iron mesh block or something like that to go with copper grates, or if it ends up being a new type of material. I just like the notion that there can be more transparent blocks like that don't have to come from either like leaves in the natural world or the kind of things that we'd use in structures to make windows. And this really comes from the position of where I'm at with the Windy City build, is wanting to make it feel a little bit more airy and light. I feel like I'm building, I want to build tall I want to build large, but I don't want the whole thing to just feel like a sort of suffocating, boots on the ground modern city. I want there to be a little bit more sort of like the notion that the buildings could almost like take off a little bit. And one of the things I did on Misadventures when I was designing some of the sky stuff that I started on was having copper grates just embedded into the walls of some of the and the corners of some of the buildings, as though the air could just kind of breeze through them. And I like the idea of having stuff like that. And having more transparency in builds in general can add to that, but glass can get fairly limited, especially if you don't have any kind of connected texture resource pack or whatever, and so you're using the default glass with all of its kind of framing elements to it. I think it would be nice to have, in a similar way to the materials that I was talking about earlier with the metals that could kind of tile together a bit more seamlessly, something like that, or something that has a transparent texture but isn't wholly transparent. There's something else to it. As far as what material that is, I kind of don't know. It sort of feels like it should end up being something a bit more original, because I can't think of too many other examples. But now we have copper grates, maybe some sort of like wooden trellis is a possibility as well, like things like that could add to more like garden, domestic farming infrastructure, that kind of thing. There's stuff like that isn't out of reach for Minecraft's technology already that I'd be interested to see if they could do it justice.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking, like, what if scaffolding wasn't ugly? Like, what if it was like boxes? Like, what?
You're very cruel to scaffolding, Joel, but I understand.
But you can't really do a whole lot with it from a build perspective because it's the same color as bamboo, so it's very limited,
yes, I
right?
understand. Yeah.
But if it was a neutral, like metal frame, like a box, like a cube without faces, you could think about like creating that as like airy structures. Like it would still look sturdy, but it would still look light. Like that kind of a thing. And you could do that too with wooden frames. Have different frames available. Some would look metal, some would look wooden. I think that would be cool. It reminds me of like what I did with the texture on my note block. I made it look like a crate just so that it was easier to have that kind of texture around Westo, and that kind of a crisscross. Like a box with like a cross brace could be interesting in terms of building with stuff like that. And I like the idea of having air blocks through it, like having it look like stuff can get through it, especially if you can also then waterlog it, because then you could have it be submerged or partially submerged and still have it have that kind of effect. I think that kind of stuff would be really, really cool. I wonder if you could use it in like aircraft, like having something look like it has, I guess, some sort of foil to it, or like using, even though Minecraft doesn't have wind, like something that would make it look like you could take advantage of that. Like I'm thinking about around here we see like housing vents, like ventilation for eaves and attics and dryers and things like that, and have like that horizontal kind of grate to them. And that could be an interesting thing that you could add for texture or repeating a pattern. And I guess the only thing there is that, how do you design it and texture it so it doesn't look like just one thing with just one build purpose? Like it would be trickier to come up with something like that. But I think it's a good idea. Do you have anything that's like an item or a game function that's on your list, like something that's not just a block?
See, having, like I said in the intro, played Enshrouded recently, I'm still on the train of having some sort of swappable hotbar situation. I think that'd be really great, especially in combination with shelves. I haven't used shelves for the redstone purpose where you can swap items in and out very much
Me
yet.
either.
And I truly think that's because I don't always want to just dump my entire hotbar and then still have to manually place a bunch of other stuff in it. Now, you can obviously swap it one for one with whatever's in the shelf already, and I need to get more situations like that, but I just find that technology hasn't sort of occurred to me as eminently usable on the fly. Maybe it's something I might try out for my next section of Beacon Mine that I'm digging out, but overall, I've not found that as useful yet. I think it could be good for other things than survival gameplay, of course, but I think if you add in the possibility to hit like left alt and swap in the first row of your inventory for the hotbar and cycle things out that way, that's still game functionality that I would absolutely treasure, and would be really great for inventory management in general. So that's something that's on my list. In terms of like items and stuff though, I don't know how much I really have in mind, because there are few things that I'm super unhappy with, or things that I haven't like discussed very recently that I think like I still think it would be fun to have a way to use the spyglass as a camera that you could look at your builds from a distance and things like that. But things like that seem a little bit more far-fetched. How about you? Have you got any items or gameplay functions that you think you want to add in future?
I'll mention this quickly because we covered it on the show recently, and that is wider ranges on beacons, like having more beacon functionality and stuff like that. I think would be a good thing. But again, that's because I'm building at scale right now, and I'm currently running outside of the radius of my 6 or 8 beacons that I've got around. So like, it's a first world problem in terms of Minecraft building.
Sure.
But the other one is rockets that don't go quite as far. Like a half speed rocket instead of a level, like a level 0.5 instead of a level 1. This is partially, again, me as a streamer wanting to get as much done in my 3-hour window as I can. And it's too far to run and too close to rocket. So I end up like overshooting it by a country mile and then doing a really weird spin thing, which I then feel self-conscious about. Like, I'm fine with it, but like my audience is probably like, what are you doing? When you're using a rocket to travel 50 blocks, when you really could run it. And yes, I could just walk it, but it just, when you're excited about a build and you're trying to get a lot done, it feels tedious to just walk this, especially if it's not interesting. It's a boring walk back to the storage system. It's just a straight line, right? Of just kind of getting there and getting your stuff and turning around. And so it's not as slow as the Happy Gas, but it is something that I find I do a lot, which is like use these little elytra hops. And it would be cool to do something similar but different. So maybe it's not a rocket. Maybe it's just something that could do like a little bit more. I don't want to use a wind charge, but something that is going to give me a little bit of a boost with the elytra that I don't have to then rely on such a large boost for the rocket. Would be fun. I think that could open up some traversal, some gameplay. It could have some mini games. Like there could be a lot of uses for it in an imaginative community like the Minecraft community.
How would you craft them is the next question, because
that was my other thing.
Level 1 rockets right now, 1 gunpowder, 1 paper. I can see them adding a crafting recipe that's like 1 gunpowder and 2 paper, as though you're splitting the gunpowder up equally between those two. But even then, it feels like a bit of a push compared to the other rocket recipes. But those each have like additional gunpowder in the recipe, so adding additional paper maybe could like divide it up a little bit. I can see that maybe happening. That's an interesting one.
I don't know. Gunpowder and turtle scoots, maybe? I don't know.
Slow rocket. Yeah, no, I like that. That's a fun idea.
Travel at the speed of slow.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Turtle rockets, they're the new thing. Maybe they'd be green instead of red as well, so you could see them a little more easily in the inventory. I like that notion. It's a fun one. Well, I think we'll leave it on that note as the rockets start sounding even more festive. That's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Thank you so much for listening, folks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in this holiday season. You can find us at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday, and you can also join our Hangouts where we either talk behind-the-scenes facts and figures of the podcast, or we talk about what you've been doing in Minecraft that month. We're currently at 269 patrons on the Patreon page. That's the same as last week, so we'd love to welcome more people in the month of December. Special thanks, as always, go out to our content engineer patrons who help make this stuff happen. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. We also want to give a shout out to our new annual memberships from Teal Bard, Mrs. Luigi Vargas, Mikatu, and Linguini Wow. Thank you, folks, for supporting us for a full year.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on your favorite social media platforms. New episodes are out on Mondays, and they are on your favorite podcasting platform, as well as video versions on YouTube and on Spotify. You can, of course, check out thespawnchunks.com for the show notes, and the Spawn Chunks RSS feed is there as well. You can also get the Patreon RSS feed on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the program.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixel You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch when I can. I'm doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series over there. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft Recap, currently covering Season 11. You can find us through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing right now online can be linked through joelduggan.com, or you can also listen to The Citadel Cafe, my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. We are planning episode 500 coming up in the next couple of weeks. I am Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find. I'm going to point you towards TikTok, where I share a lot of clips from my streams over on twitch.tv/Joel Duggan. And that is where I stream at 9 a.m. Tuesday through Friday, as well as on Saturdays, I do a 1 p.m. stream. And if you've been paying close attention this episode, you might know what Lego set is coming next on Fridays.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but Santa can still reach everyone in a single night.